Good evening, everyone. My name is Kimberly Bean. I am the K-8 Math and Science Supervisor for the school district. My email is listed right there, so if you ever need to contact me, you can contact me at that address. I've been in the district for, I think it's 26 years in different positions. I've been in this current description for, I don't know, 10, something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but enough to know what I'm talking about tonight. And so that's what we will jump into. I will say that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And then when I'm done going through the presentation, I can go through the Q&A and answer the specific questions if they haven't already been answered in the presentation. And I think that's all we need to know jumping in. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. Parents of fifth graders, there's going to be upcoming in the district something called a family fun night for grades 3 through 5. And I believe it's going to be on May 4th, but that date could change. And at that evening, I will be doing a session for more personal Q&A conversation about any questions or concerns you have about going into, middle school math. I can get more personal in that setting than I can certainly here, where this is very sort of controlled and scripted. So I hope to see you there it's like a plug for Family Fun Night, which I believe is going to be at Delia Bolden Elementary, but I'm not sure about that either. So keep your eyes open for that information. And let's get started. The first thing I would say to sort of frame this, right? If I'm going to sit there and say, what's the view I want all of us to have on that? And it's that there are many paths to get to graduation. There isn't one route that is best for every single student. And I know we always say that, like, oh, it's about the individual journey and all of that. But in the case of math, there are so many different paths you could follow, because in math, those paths start in 6th grade. In most subjects, they don't start until 9th grade. So we have these additional middle school years to start these different paths. And there's lots of times to change your mind along the way and make adjustments along the way. And so I don't want anyone to think that, particularly parents of fifth graders, I don't want anyone to think, oh, I'm making a decision in the next few weeks that's going to determine when and how my child graduates from high school. That is not the case at all. It can feel like that to parents, and I think sometimes parents add that urgency to it, but I'm going to point out along the way all the different places you can change your mind just at the middle school. And then when you go to the high school, there's a whole other set of options that occur and then you can make decisions and make changes. So what you're deciding now is not permanent. It's not set in stone. It's not a track, as we used to call them, where it's like once you're on it, you're in that for life. It's not that way at all. You can make changes along the way. And part of the reason that those changes are so wide open in South Orange and Maplewood schools is that the Board of Ed put in this policy, I'm not sure, 6 or 7 years ago, let's say, might be 8 at this point, and just saying that any student can choose any level of course that's offered in their grade level at that time. And so whereas in the past with these math courses, students had to essentially test into them, that's no longer the case. Any student can choose whichever math course they would like. The other thing I wanted to say, I should have said it with the multiple paths, and that is, why is math different than the other subjects? In that, why does math start in 6th grade with these choices and other subjects don't start until 9th grade with these, choices? And the reason for that really goes all the way back to the space race, right, of Sputnik, and this race America got into in terms of competitiveness in mathematics, in who can get farther faster than other countries. And when they did that, there was sort of like this universal decision that all students need to have calculus. And the problem with that was, in order to get to calculus, because math, one course builds on the previous course, right? It has to be very linear, unlike other subjects, or it's best done if it's linear and chronological. There were too many courses to fit between 6th grade and 12th grade for all students to get to calculus. So there became these different arrangements to try to get kids to calculus so that we were superior in the space race. And since then, there have been some changes. The standards have changed to give us a little more wiggle room to adjust things and combine things. And I can say that even in recent years, there's been less of a push to get kids to calculus. I have a cousin who worked in the Department of Engineering, counseling in the Department of Engineering at Boston University. And she used to say, no, 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 we don't want students to have calculus before they come here. We want to teach them calculus the way we want them to know calculus. So I'm not saying that calculus is bad. I'm just saying not every school is looking for calculus as some kind of measure. Not the case at all. Our 912 STEM supervisor was recently at this college roundtable that was held at Columbia High School, and she went around and asked every college and university there, do you require calculus? And not one of them said yes. So sort of frame that when I'm talking about there are these multiple paths, there are literally multiple paths, and they don't need to all end in one place. They can end in lots of different places, depending on what the student wants to do, what they're interested in, what their outside commitments are, and what they want to do after high school. So there's a lot of different options. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, you received in the mail, an email, sorry, you received an email that had a chart that looks something like this. And it told you that in grade 6, there are 2 choices for math courses. There is grade 6 math, and there's grade 6 pre-algebra. And in grade 7, there are 3 choices: grade 7 math, grade 7 pre-algebra, and algebra 1. And in grade 8, we also have 3 choices: grade 8 intro to algebra, algebra 1, and geometry. So you either have 2 choices in 6th grade or 3 choices in the other grades. Not too overwhelming. This is only middle school. We're not trying to bombard anyone, but we do like options. And so we'll go through what these different options mean and some things you should consider when making this decision. All right. You'll see on here grade 6 pre-algebra and grade 7 pre-algebra. And I want to stress these courses are similar, but they are not identical. They are similar in that they both address grade 7 standards. In grade 6 pre-algebra, we teach all of grade 6 and all of grade 7. And in grade 7 pre-algebra, we teach all of grade 7 and a little bit of grade 8. So they're similar, but they're different. We use different unit tests in grade 6 than we do in grade 7. The teachers aren't sharing lessons across because the lessons are different. In grade 6 pre-algebra, when we teach a 7th grade concept, we're teaching it connected to the 6th grade concept. So it's sort of like in one day you get the 6th grade version of it and then the 7th grade version of it. Whereas in grade 7 pre-algebra, you're just getting solidly the grade 7 approach to it. And then the next thing is these 2 courses, Algebra 1 in grade 7 and Algebra 1 in grade 8. In this case, these courses are the exact same thing. The teachers use generally the same assessments. Their quizzes are different, but their unit assessments are the same. And they do a lot of sharing of lesson ideas. So these courses are the same whether you take it in 7 and 8. There's no advantage to taking it in 7 versus 8. It's the same course. I do want to point out that Algebra 1 in middle school is different than Algebra 1 in grade 9. When you take Algebra 1 in high school, it is just the standards, the state standards that are written for Algebra 1. That's it. When you take Algebra 1 in middle school, we are combining 2 courses together. You're getting all of the grade 8 standards plus all of the grade 9 Algebra 1 standards. So it's 2 courses in one. So although our 7 and 8 Algebra 1 are the same, they are different than the course a little bit at the high school. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that in geometry, although it looks like there are three choices at 8th grade, geometry is only a choice if a student has successfully completed Algebra 1. That's the only time you get to choose geometry. So you can't just, no one can just come in and choose choose geometry because they have to have finished Algebra 1. And that's simply because these are state graduation requirements, Algebra 1 and geometry. And at the high school, Algebra 1 is a prerequisite for geometry. So we run the same system here at the middle school level. All right, so let's look at how it is set up. As the New Jersey standards, and for that matter, the National Common Core standards, are written, we're looking at 5 courses from grade 6 through grade 10. They're the grade 6 standards. They're the grade 7 standards, which we call grade 7 math or pre-algebra. They're the grade 8 standards, which we call intro to algebra. There's the grade 9 standards, which is algebra 1, and the grade 10 standards, which are geometry. So throughout the country and throughout the state, algebra 1 is a 9th grade course and geometry is a 10th grade course. But as I said before, throughout the space race and the calculus race and whatever it was, people looked for some ways to move through more math content more quickly. Very common throughout the United States and the state of New Jersey is taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So this means grade 6 math, grade 7 pre-algebra, and then in grade 8, our students take grade 8 intro to algebra and Algebra 1 in 1 year. And then when they go on to CHS, they will take geometry. I personally think this is the most sane version, but that depends on the child. But this is a really reasonable pace. That is why so much of the country does it this way. Years ago, South Orange Maplewood added an even faster path than that. It was created as something for gifted and talented students, and then through the access and equity policy became something available to all. And that is in grade 6, you can take grade 6 and grade 7 in 1 year, which we call grade 6 pre-algebra. And in grade 7, students can take intro to algebra and Algebra 1 in 1 year, which we call Algebra 1. And then in grade 8, they take geometry. So that sounds to Americans, that sounds like a deal. I get 5 years and 3 years, I get a bargain. And yeah, that can be true. But I also have to say that this pace is relentless in that in a normal instructional year, if you're looking at 5th grade or grade 6 math, basically it looks like we teach something new and then we practice it for a day or two in different variations and in different contexts. So we teach and we practice, we teach and we practice. But when we do these courses that are 2 courses in 1 year, every day we're teaching you 2 or 3 new things. So in grade 6 pre-algebra, you're going to have a day where you learn the 6th grade version of, let's say, how to represent integers and absolute value and things like that. And then on that same day, you're going to do some addition and subtraction with integers, which is the 7th grade look at integers. There's no day of, hey, let's take some time off and marinate with this and practice it in different contexts. You're going to learn the 6th grade and the 7th grade in one day, and then the next day you're going to come in and you're going to learn the 6th grade and the 7th grade version of some new concept. It's a constant teach every day. There is just very little time for practice. And you say, what's the rush? The rush is we're trying to complete 2 grades in 1 year. It's very difficult to do. We've been doing it for several years now, and we are able to do it in terms of teaching, but that doesn't mean every student is able to absorb the math at that pace. That doesn't mean the student isn't intelligent enough, because I'm a huge believer in that speed in mathematics does not equal understanding of mathematics, right? Speed is a different skill altogether. And students who are slow and deliberate in mathematics are often just slow and deliberate in other things. It doesn't mean they don't understand it. It's just that they perform computations deliberately. So I don't think speed is always, uh, speed doesn't always equate to better understanding, and it certainly doesn't equate to deeper understanding. But these courses do move at a very fast rate. So those are the different pieces. The top line gives you 5 years in 5 years. The middle line gives you 5 years in 4 years. And the bottom line gives you 5 years in 3 years. So we're back to this. Now that we've looked at those progressions, what does that look like when you lay that on top of this chart of choices? So let's say a student starts in grade 6 math, and then the following year they choose to go into grade 7 math, and the following year they choose to go into grade 8 introduction to algebra. That's one path. Another path is the student could take grade 6 math, then take grade 7 pre-algebra, and then here's one of those, what I see is another option moment, is after grade 7 pre-algebra, students and parents can decide, is the child ready for Algebra 1, that level of high abstraction and reasoning, or do they need another year of preparation for algebra? And in which case, they could go to Intro to Algebra, or they could take Algebra 1. And another path would be you could take grade 6 pre-algebra, and after a year of that, you could say, yes, this child is performing well, understanding everything, very flexible, balancing middle school very well, is adjusting beautifully, and they're ready for Algebra 1. Or we could say, whoa, that was too fast. We're not sure that, my child did great with the grade 6 content, but the grade 7 content was a challenge. Then another option would be to take grade 7 pre-algebra the following year. The reason I put that as a dotted line is because if a child finishes grade 6 pre-algebra with below a 70%, we, the math department, I, Kimberly being the supervisor, am going to recommend, if they scored below 70%, that they take grade 7 pre-algebra. And you say, why would you do that? I thought we have a choice. You do have a choice. It's still absolutely your choice. I also get to recommend something, and you still get to make a choice. My recommendation would be based on this. We want, more than anything, our goal is to make sure students are successful in Algebra 1. That is the goal of middle school mathematics, that we are preparing students for Algebra 1. We know that Algebra 1 is the keystone for all of high school mathematics and some of the science courses as well. So we know that students who do well in Algebra 1 also do well in Algebra 2 and pre-calculus, and of course calculus. We also know they do well in physics. Students who do not do well in Algebra 1 struggle in physics, struggle in Algebra 2, struggle in pre-calc, and of course calculus. So we know this. And as a result of that, so many of our recommendations are based on this idea of we want students to know Algebra 1 in the best way possible. So if a child reaches the end of grade 6 pre-algebra and we feel like they're not getting everything they need to be ready for Algebra 1, we're going to recommend grade 7 pre-algebra so they get another year with the grade 7 pre-algebra concepts, so then that they're ready for Algebra 1 in grade 8. And if we do feel like they're doing well, they're getting an A or a B, then yes, they can move on to Algebra 1. And then after a student takes Algebra 1 in 7th grade, that's another one of those opportunities for choices. If everything's going well, smoothly, the child feels good about their progress, they're getting an A or a B, absolutely move into geometry. If they're getting below a 70%, we as the math department are going to recommend that they retake Algebra 1. And I get that that is an emotional hurdle. That idea of, retaking a course is such a dash to the ego. And people would try to tell me, can't they take intro to algebra instead? It's like, no, they already took something harder than that. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't gain them anything. And so, like I said before, algebra 1, being successful in algebra 1 is what our goal is. So if they struggled in algebra 1, we would like them to take it again so that hopefully they can do better the second time around. And I say that even if a child takes algebra 1 in grade 8, and if they're not doing well in grade 8, I would recommend they take it. Let's say they're scoring below 70% as an 8th grader. I would say take algebra 1 in 9th grade. Colleges will never know. The beauty of all these different paths in middle school is like it's like a free do-over and gimmies. Like colleges never see what happens in middle schools. They don't check. They don't have any concern about it. So all they see is what happens on a student's transcript from 9th grade forward. So you can make any adjustment before then. So if a student was struggling in algebra 1 in 8th grade, rather than going to 9th grade and struggling in geometry, I'd recommend the child takes algebra 1 and does better. So now you have a transcript that shows colleges, it looks completely normal to take algebra in 9th grade, and then a student is performing well in it. So that's just how we see it. We see algebra 1 as that important, and we want everything we do to prepare students for that. Some things to consider. All middle school math courses have a path to calculus by grade 12. It doesn't matter which course you end in 8th grade, whether it's intro to algebra, algebra 1, or geometry, you can still get to calculus by grade 12. We have, as I showed you, the different paths than in middle school. There's a whole bunch of options at Columbia High School. There's summers. You can take 2 courses in a year. There's different options there. And so we can still get a child to calculus if that's what their desire is by grade 12. As I said, depending what they're going to do after college, calculus may not even be relevant. But if calculus is the thing that's in your head, we can make that happen no matter where they end 8th grade. Not a problem. Second is each student develops abstract and multivariable reasoning at a different rate. It's not about intelligence. This is developmental. When is a child ready to think this abstractly? This idea about lines being represented by formulas is sort of, or equations is sort of an abstract way of thinking, and that takes they can sort of follow the procedures at first, but then it starts to get a little wonky when we get into quadratics, and that line is no longer a straight line. And so that's a developmental piece, to be able to think that way. It's not about intelligence. So don't get stuck on my child's not smart enough. That's not the case at all. They're just going to grow into it. That's all. COVID, quarantines, virtual instruction, all have impacted student learning. If your child's in 5th grade now, they were in virtual instruction in 3rd grade. As a supervisor, I say 3rd grade. That means they were in virtual instruction for the introduction to the meaning of multiplication and multiplication facts, and also the introduction to fractions and comparing and ordering fractions and equivalence of fractions. All those things are possible for us to recoup when students came into 4th grade, but it's a lot because we're also learning 4th grade in 4th grade. So just be aware that your child may have gaps that were caused by this sort of disruption the globe had. And so just check with your child's teacher to see, are they aware of, have they experienced any gaps in that you can work on with your child. There's no one assessment or rule that can predict if a student will be successful in a given math course. I can get pretty good with predictability, but it's never fully accurate because there's always outliers. There's always a child who blossoms in middle school, or a child who blossomed in elementary school and is more conservative and inside themselves in middle school, and they change at different kids change at different ages. And so no one test is going to tell us that. I will give you some good guidelines, but ultimately this decision has a lot to do with who your child is and how they handle challenge and stress and being, and how they learn best with the teach, practice, or do they learn better when they're constantly being pushed ahead every day. For students currently in grade 6 or 7, you're already pretty familiar with the system. So you're just thinking about, my child's already in middle school. Did they average an A throughout their current math course? If they averaged an A and there's a higher level, they may want to consider a higher level course. If they got an A or a B, they may just want to stay on the same sort of level course that they are on. Is the student looking for more challenge and work? Some kids and grown-ups are happy getting an A in a course and feeling confident and successful. Others would rather get a B and feel pushed. It's just a different type of personality. So you need to know for your child which is the right way or the best way for them to learn. And has the student been successful managing middle school this year? That's the biggest question. Middle school is its own set of its own reality. I'll say, elementary and middle are very different, and middle and high school are very different. And each time children navigate this big change, but we can't sort of just assume that it's a super easy transition for them from 5th grade to 6th grade, or from 8th grade to 9th grade for that matter. This is a big change socially. What they have to manage, what they have to organize, all the different teachers they have to work with. It's a big deal. So if everything's going well, that's going to, for your child, that's going to influence your decision in math. If they're having some struggles, that's also going to influence your decision in math. For students currently in grade 5, did the student score 4s in most math topics on the progress report? And you say, okay, we don't have A, B, C, D, so why did I pick 4s? I picked 4s because 4 on the elementary progress report means that students are able to do additional challenge, higher level reasoning. That's specifically what that matters, and we have specific test items that measure that. So if your child is consistently scoring 4s on many math topics on the progress report, that means they're already handling the hardest math problems we have in our current math program, which is actually saying something, because those are some pretty intense problems. So that tells me a lot if a child's getting 4s. I specifically would be looking at how well they did with whole number and fraction computation. Are they fluent in those topics? And you say, oh, why those 2 topics? I can tell you exactly why those 2 topics. They're the hardest things that we teach. The hardest things that we teach in elementary school arithmetic, are long division of multi-digit numbers and subtraction of mixed numbers with unlike denominators. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And I say that because it is kind of funny, but it's not brutal because the math is so hard. It's brutal because the number of things a child has to be manipulating in their mind to make all of that work shows that they are really comfortable in their facts. They're very fluent with their relationships among numbers, and they're able to draw on the important information that they need in the moment that they need it. So both that long division and all the fraction computation, that shows when students are operating at their highest level. And also it shows the fraction piece, which there's a lot of research on. Students who do well in 4th and 5th grade fractions also do well in Algebra 1 later on. So it's a big predictor of Algebra 1. The reason for that isn't just the fractions themselves. It's because of all the different knowledge that you have to bring to the front of your brain to make all of that happen, and all of the understanding, all the number sense that goes with it. So those are big topics. And then, of course, with middle school, how will students handle the changing of rooms and teachers every 45 minutes? My son is now in 11th grade, but I remember vividly when he changed from Tuscan Elementary School to Maplewood Middle. And it was I was concerned. He's not the most focused child in, in 5th grade. He's now really intense in 11th grade, but in 5th grade, he was pretty much always down for a good time. He was just sort of a happy-go-lucky kid. And so I wasn't quite sure how this was all going to come together. And if I can speak to the magic of our middle schools, it is that they navigate that transition all the time. They take the kids who really have just been sort of freewheeling it, you know, living, being little kids, having a good time in elementary school, and then shapes them and gets them ready for the demands of high school. So it's pretty great, but it is a big transition for kids, specifically sixth grade. And I also can say our sixth grade math teachers are wonderful. They are top notch. Many of them have taught elementary school before, so they understand what they are dealing with. But still, it is middle school, and the students have to make that change. So those are some things to consider. All right, that is all of the information I wanted to get across. So it's just sort of, now you're looking at all of these courses and you're considering all of those aspects and you're making the choice that is best for your child. You're considering both the academic as well as the emotional and organizational side of it. The executive functioning side of middle school is much more important than it was in elementary school. And then in high school, it ratchets up even more. So, you know, if executive functioning is something your child's not good at, be ready to be a huge support there, or to make decisions that give them a little more wiggle room and time to figure it out themselves. And then going back to my initial metaphor about there are many paths to graduation. And right now I'm just considering the paths for middle school. But even just in middle school, we provide these multiple opportunities to make a decision and then change the decision. You can even change your decision. Like if a student's in grade 6 pre-algebra and they're really struggling and you're midway through second quarter and you're like, this is not working out, the child can move into grade 6 math. We can do that. It's not as doable to say, oh, my child's in grade 7 pre-algebra and halfway through the year they'd like to move into algebra 1. We can't do that because they've missed half the course. And that's very difficult for us to do. It's impossible for us to do unless we test the child and they have actually learned that content elsewhere. We don't do that because Algebra 1 is a state graduation requirement. And as I said before, as I stressed before, Algebra 1 is the keystone of success for high school mathematics and some of the science. So we don't move up really past a couple of weeks into school. And first couple of weeks into school, we'll make movements. That's not a problem. It's just once the courses are in full motion, we can't make that change. But someone can move from grade 6 to grade 6 pre-algebra to grade 6 math because they haven't really missed anything, right? They've been learning grade 6 math all along. They're in grade 7 pre-algebra and they want to move into grade 7 math. That's not a problem. They've been learning that content. They might be farther ahead, but they've been learning the same content all along. So those changes aren't a big issue for us. We just can't move kids into courses that they've now missed half the course. But lots of options, lots of paths to graduation. And I said, when you move into Columbia, there's a whole other, oh, I don't even want to show you. That'll give you anxiety. That was the Columbia courses. But you're just a whole bunch of other options once you get to Columbia. All right, now I'm trying to get to the Q&A, though I thankfully have been seeing that Ms. Grinnell and Mr. Brown have been answering questions along the way. Literally can't see them. There we go. Okay, so now I can see those. Will this be recorded? Yes, it's recorded. Is it? Yes. If you choose 6th and 7th grade.
Ms. Bean, hello, it's Lewis
Hi.
Brown.
Hi, Mr. Brown.
Hold on. There I am.
Oh,
Excuse me.
hi.
Hi. Um, if I can just jump in, the questions that we weren't able to answer is there are a
Okay.
few
Oh, I
questions
love.
about recommendations from teachers. In the past,
Yes.
there hasn't been recommendations, but they heard you mention recommendations from their teachers.
Yes, we don't sort of write or send out or make official recommendations in any way. But if you contact the teacher, they will give you a recommendation. They will say, "This is what I think." Or they might say, "Look, they were really strong in this. They had some areas of need in these other topics." And that's the answer right there. So, yes, they absolutely can make recommendations. They don't, again, it's just there's no hard and fast answer that's going to be right for everyone, but they're making their decision based on, we know that students are usually successful based on this criteria. So they're saying, I think this is the best course for your child based on what I have seen. And sometimes parents take that advice, and sometimes it's not what they wanted to hear, and they don't take that advice. And that's understandable too. As I showed with the Board of Ed policy, it you have the right to choose. Our recommendation is just based on what we know and what teachers have seen in class. And so, yes, you can always change. Does a 7th grader in pre-algebra have the option to go to more advanced math next year? And they're in 7th grade pre-algebra. The following year, they can take Algebra 1, which is accelerated, or they can move to grade 8 intro to algebra. Why is there a special meaning for math, but not one or say for English or science? Excellent question. I talked about it a little at the beginning. It's because math is the first course to sort of start to separate into different paths. We start in 6th grade, and the other courses don't start until 9th grade. And I talked a lot about how that's related to the space race and how America was trying to get ahead of other countries. And then that became the space race translated into the calculus race. And all that is sort of mellowed now, but there is still sort of this inclination to, because math is taught in sequential courses, to try to get through this sequence much more quickly. You
I
guys did
can
a great job answering.
jump in again. There are a couple
Yeah, go ahead.
questions about what's going to be offered in the summer for people who may want support in challenging themselves next fall, or someone who maybe didn't take algebra in 7th grade, would they have the option to take algebra in the summer to be in geometry in 8th grade?
In the summer, the programs that are offered are, I believe, they're offered school-based and they're intervention focused, if I recall. That's what we have been offering for the last, I think, 2 years, might be 3, but I think it's 2 years. And so that is the focus for now. There is not something specific, not courses specifically offered for students who are looking to move up from one course to another, but we do offer work that kids can do if they want to over the summer to help with that. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through more of the questions to see if we got anything. Mr. Brown, let me know if there's anything else that springs to mind. We talked about recommendations. We talked about summer courses. They can change to a different course if they're struggling. Will the choice between grade 7 math and grade 7 pre-algebra depend on how the student performs in grade 6 math? Well, the choice is completely up to the family, but yes, that's what I would base it on. If they felt that they needed to more support or more time to practice in between each new concept, then I would choose grade 7 math. If they feel like, no, I'm ready to start moving up to more to get ready for algebra 1 the following year, then they should take grade 7 pre-algebra. And none of these are like permanent decisions. They're just sort of the best path if you want to get to Algebra 1. If it's going really well, then yeah, challenge yourself a little bit. Answered about summer math booster classes. We haven't offered summer math booster classes in a couple of years. This is simply about how we've rearranged in the time of how COVID money had to be spent and such. And so we don't offer the booster classes anymore, and are in a place of our summer programs are for intervention students of highest need. Oh, well, there's a compliment. I should read that one out loud, but I won't. How are fifth grade teachers preparing their students for the daily math homework they get in sixth grade when there's none in fifth grade? I don't really think there is necessarily daily math homework in sixth grade. That homework is only assigned as it's needed. So it isn't suddenly that they're going to shift to lots of homework in sixth grade. But I'm a big believer in that fifth grade should not be sixth grade. Fifth grade should be fifth grade. And so there's a lot of adjustments they're going to have to make. And more homework is going to be one of those changes. I mean, they're going to have more work in like science, for example, because I'm also in charge of science, so I'm pretty aware of it. We go from science 2 to 3 times a week in the elementary school to suddenly this is now an everyday subject for 45 minutes a day, just like math and language arts. And so now science and social studies become full-fledged subjects. So that's additional homework as well. I haven't found, and we were just meeting with high school teachers the other day, and even ninth grade teachers are saying we don't assign a ton of homework unless it's needed, because it's just not a good indicator of what students are able to do independently, because either a tutor is helping or a parent is helping or an older sibling is helping. And so it doesn't always give us the information that we would like anyway. So we use it just as a matter of practice. So it's not homework's not a big issue, actually. Do all levels have inclusion classes? Yes. And that's a big one. Meaning we even have a geometry class this year that, a child receives special ed support. It could be inclusion, or in theory, it could also be consult model. The child may not need full in-class support, in which case we can do a consult model. So there are different models, but yes, they absolutely receive special ed support no matter what math course they are in. To clarify, there's no way for a 7th grade in pre-algebra to move up to geometry in 8th. That is correct. There is no way for a 7th grader in pre-algebra to move up to geometry. No way. That's just has to do with state graduation requirements, Columbia High School, program of study, all these things that we don't even have control over at the middle school. All right, I think we actually hit it. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for all your help there. If my child is taking Algebra 1 now in 8th grade, can she take geometry in the summer in order to take Algebra 2 in the fall? Yes. So there is a current program at the high school. I say current because every budget year is a different year. But there is a current program at the high school where there are 3 courses offered for credit for math. So if a child's taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they could take geometry in the summer and then start 9th grade in Algebra 2. And we have a lot of students, a good number of students, who are in grade 8 introduction to algebra, and then over the summer they take Algebra 1 so that they can then start high school in geometry. And I will advocate for those summer programs in the sense that people say, oh my gosh, I wouldn't want to spend 5 to 6 hours a day in class doing math in the summer. And that could sound like a bummer to some people, not necessarily my people, but it could sound like a bummer. But actually, we have found over the decades that kids really do well in that circumstance. They're not as distracted by other things, and they're spending their full day in math. So it actually works pretty well. Though they do have to give up something like 5 weeks of their summer. Is there more homework for the advanced math in grade 6 compared to 6th grade math? Probably some. Probably some. Um not extremely, but they should be ready for there to be more homework in grade 6 pre-algebra than regular grade 6 math, but it won't be every night like that. The 6th grade teachers are really cool. They really are just the nicest people. So they will only give it if it's necessary. If students enter high school at the Algebra 2 level, will they be in classes with students from multiple grade levels, or is there a 9th grade only class? They will be in with students of other grade levels. Yes. And that's true at the high school for all the electives as well. So only in language arts, social studies, and science, and probably your health class could you guarantee to be with kids of your own grade level. The rest of it, you could be with anyone. I know that was quite a shock for me when, my son was in 9th grade and in electives with seniors. Like, that was a big change. All right. So I think we hit everything. And, do many students drop down from 6th grade? Okay. Do many students drop down from 6th grade pre-algebra to 6th grade math because it is too hard? Yes, they do. I don't know what constitutes many in this regard. It's not the majority. But it is not a unique thing for us to see that. It's pretty normal for us to see it, especially in the first 2 quarters. I don't know. Mr. Brown, do you have a good number on that? How many moved down from 6 pre-algebra to regular 6 math? I'm not sure what the number is.
I
He does
don't.
schedules, that's why I asked.
We do have a spreadsheet that we keep, but I don't have it open now. It's not a huge
Okay.
number. It
Yeah.
is. It's below 10% for sure.
Yeah.
Probably around 5% or less.
So it's like we're used to it. It's not a big deal. It happens, from year to year. No one would think it was strange if it did happen, but it's not a huge number. All right, so I'm going to make one more plug for the grade 3 through 5 family fun night, which I think is going to be on May 4th, and I think it's going to be at Delia Bolden School. So keep your eyes out for information for that, because at that event, I will be able to do a more in-person Q&A with parents of 5th graders. Other than that, thank you, everybody. This has been fun, and thank you to Mr. Brown for keeping me on course there. Thank you very much. And I'll hang out and watch the Q&A a little longer if there are any questions. And other than that, the presentation is finished. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Mr. Brown. And happy Assistant Principal Appreciation Week. Oh, someone asked, how do we register our decision? You will receive information from your middle school about how specifically to do it, but you're going to go into Power School, and I'm forgetting right now, I'd have to look it up. What is the indicator on when you go into Power School as a parent? There's something along the left-hand column that you select, and you're going to use it because you're not just selecting a math course, you're also selecting like a world language and an arts rotation or something. And so you'll get information from the school how to do that because they're selecting several things. If our son is ready intellectually, but not so much on the organization part, what should we do? This one speaks to my soul. um, that was my son. I would say, well, it depends what grade they're in, but I would actually say try if it's a 5th grader going to 6th grade, I would say try pre-algebra and be there with the organizational support. Meaning the first thing, I taught elementary school for a long time. So when my own child went into 6th grade, I created a binder that had the separate sections for each of the subjects and then color coded spiral notebook. Like I had a whole system, right? And I started that system when he was in 4th grade, honestly, so that he could then eventually from that, he has created his own system, which has changed over time. And in middle school, they all like that binder that zips up and has a shoulder strap. I'm forgetting what the name is. But anyway, so you want to help them with that organization and know that helping a child with organization is a nightly event. It's not just like, well, I set him up for the year, he's good. No, it has to be a constant. I would go through and for my son, it was in 7th grade when he took algebra 1 that it was like, that's when the pressure, he felt the pressure, right? And so we would go through every night and all the handouts that she had, I would put them in, the 3-hole punch slip covers and put them in the binder. So he had everything that she handed out. He had in these, I forget what they're called, but the slip covers that fit in your notebook so that he could see everything that she had handed out and have quick reference to it and it would not get damaged. And so I set up that system for him. And then, every couple of days would have to be like, did she give any more of the handouts? Let's look at them. Let's put them in there and, and set it up like that so that he had everything. And I would make sure that after, after a semester, we would then clear everything out, even after a quarter. So he's not carrying it around still. Like it's just a constant process to support the organization. If it helps, I don't have to do it now that he's in 11th grade. But in middle school, I had to do a lot of that, especially in 6th and 7th. Honestly, by 8th grade, my kid was like on his own. He was just doing it. But, 6th and 7th can be a transition. Does the Algebra 1 and Geometry course end up counting as the high school math requirement? This is a tricky answer. It counts for the state graduation requirement, assuming they pass all the, the NJSLA tests along the way. But it counts for the high school the state graduation requirement. But when they go to Columbia, they will still have to take at least 3 math courses before they can graduate in order to graduate Columbia High School. So if they already took Algebra 1 and Geometry, that means they're going to have to take Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, and at least one more math class in order to graduate Columbia High School. So something I didn't talk a lot about because I mostly get parents of 5th graders at this event. So I didn't want to lean heavily on what 7th or 8th grade parents would want to hear or need to know. But that's the thing about if you lean too heavily on this acceleration, like my kid just became sort of like a hoarder, right? Like he accelerated and then he took algebra 2 over the summer and then he was like, 20 million years ahead. And so now he's a junior and it's like, now he's out of math classes. Now what? And so what was the race? Who knows? You have to kind of weigh all of that at one time. Is there a way to move from pre-algebra to algebra 1 during grade 6? No, there is not a way to move into algebra 1 in grade 6. That is not one of our paths. Just for the record, much of the state and country thinks we're insane for teaching algebra 1 in 7th grade. I mean, really like nuts for doing it. It's pretty intense. All right, I think we hit everything. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.